And to kick this show off in proper form and through careful consultation and talking with the department, our first guest for this program is the Secretary of Veterans Affairs for the state of California, Secretary Peter Gravett. He has over 40 years of total service in the United States Army and California National Guard, 44 as a matter of fact. We were talking about this earlier before the show. 35 of those years as a commissioned officer. And so, yes, there is a point in there where he was a enlistee and a non-com, and he somewhere made the turn to the dark side. We'll talk about that later. And he was appointed to his post by Governor Brown on the 29th of April of 2011. So good morning to you, Mr. Secretary. It is a pleasure to have you here joining us on this inaugural edition of Veteran Radio.
Well, good morning to you, and thank you for having me, and also good morning to all veterans and their families.
Thank you very much, Secretary. So we have 40 years of service, U.S. Army, National Guard. Talk a little bit about when it all started for you. Did you initially enlist, earn a commission later? And, just kind of walk us through so we can get to know you a little better. And, and I will point out here that you also retired as a Major General with 2 stars in the United States Army.
Yes, actually, my career started when I was in high school. In high school, I had an interest in the military, so I joined the California Army National Guard. While in high school, I remained in high school until I graduated, and after I graduated, I went off to my basic training with the Army and served in the Army for a while, and I was released from the Army and came back home and got a civilian job and also joined the National Guard as a reservist at that point. And then for many years, I served in the National Guard while maintaining a full-time civilian job and going to school full-time.
Very nice. Now, you have a pretty large family, so you had many siblings that also served, or do any of them still serve?
No, they don't serve now. My father was a World War II veteran. He served as a Tuskegee Airman, enlisted soldier. He was a ground crewman. He and my mother had 12 children. 9 boys served in the Army. And my 2 sisters, 2 of my sisters, one married a soldier, one married a Marine. So we kind of have a veteran family. My wife is also a retired Army colonel.
Very cool. Very nice. So let's go back to the beginning. You're fresh out of basic training in the Army. You're an enlistee. This is the late 1960s. And what was your first assignment and mission?
It was actually a little before then. And my first assignment was at Fort Gordon, Georgia, at the U.S. Army Military Police School. I was initially trained as a military policeman, as an enlisted soldier.
Yep. And for everyone else out there that is not military, understand that military police, and at least the Army and the Marines, are not a very popular occupational specialty within the Army. They're routinely made fun of, but as units themselves, they're very small and cohesive.
Very small, cohesive, yep. But our motto was of the troops and for the troops. So the military policemen are part of the Army, of the troops, and for the troops, that we look out for the troops. But there's a bifurcation between what law enforcement police are and what military police are. They're not quite the same.
That is true. That is true. And we talked about it, and somewhere in future programs we'll discuss about skill mapping, because a lot of times people thought that, I'll just be an MP in the Army or security force in the Air Force, and when I get out, I'll be a shoo-in for becoming a sheriff or a state patrolman, and that really isn't the case in some cases. So for you folks that are thinking of enlisting or joining the service, bear that in mind and talk carefully with your recruiter on that. So Fort Gordon, Georgia is where you went through your AIT, as they call it now, for MPs.
Right.
And so where did you get stationed after that?
AIT is Advanced Infantry Training, or whatever the training is. After that, I served there at Fort Gordon for a number of years. And then, when I was discharged from the Army the first time, I returned home. I got a civilian job. I worked full-time, as it were, as a Los Angeles police officer, although the MP position and the police position didn't really match that well. But for the next number of years, I served full-time in the police department, and I served as a National Guardsman, initially as military police, but I quickly then transferred to armor, which is tanks, and served the rest of my enlisted career as an armor crewman on tanks.
Very nice. And during the time when I was in Iraq, we had a National Guard unit of heavy armor as what we called the heavy QRF, the Quick Response Force. So whenever some nastiness broke out, you could always hear a pair of tanks rumbling down the road to come into town and get right in the middle of the mix. And so that was a welcome sound, and it's quite amazing how fast they can get up and running when they need to.
And they can run, and the purpose of tanks is to make a presence known, and they do make a presence known, and they are a combat multiplier.
Oh, yes, yeah, and they make the presence known before they're even there. So going back now, so you as you've grown through a very long career in the service, for a lot of guys, obviously, we stay in touch with the folks that we served with over time. You still stay in touch with the guys that you served with to one degree or another?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah.
I do on a personal basis, and I do it on a professional basis also. One thing about the military, you make friends and make acquaintances is for a lifetime, and you never forget those friends, even though you don't serve together anymore, you still have contact. And besides that, I belong to a number of veteran organizations, and I have friends there and acquaintances there. Some I met after the military, but some I met in the military. So when you think of all the veteran service organizations like the American Legion, VFW, MVETS, and others, it's comprised of veterans and their families.
Yep.
And so we all kind of keep in touch that way.
Yeah. And my favorite is just meeting a vet on the street just through circumstance. Outside of the formalized structure, you always end up having a story, and in a lot of cases, you end up knowing the same people, both in the service and out of the service. As large as our military is, it is indeed a very small world.
Yes, and as it turns out, when I meet new people, one of the first things I ask them, are you a veteran? I ask that of a male and a female, a male or a female, and if they are a veteran, we have a connection. And then if they are a veteran, then I ask some follow-up questions about what they should be doing as a veteran in terms of benefits.
Sure, yeah. So, what do you wish that you could carry most from your time in the military, being both an NCO and an officer, that you wish you could just immediately apply to your current government service?
Actually, I carry it now, and first of all, I carry the training and the respect that I received in the military. The military trains individuals to become part of a team. And in that training, you learn discipline, self-respect, selfless service, and all the attributes that military services hold, whether it's Army or any other service. And you carry that into civilian life. And it's important that you have that, because what that does is it characterizes you as a person. It characterizes you as an individual, and sets you not apart from other people, but it sets you in a position where people can look up to you and say, that person has it on a ball because he's a veteran. He or she has been trained, and they have a number of attributes that others are still trying to get.
Right.